Hello, hello. All right. Welcome. Let's start with a few quick introductions and announcements. Hi, my name is Matt Sility. I chair the MFA in Comics program. It's so good to see all of you. First of all, is there anyone in the audience that this is their first time at CCA? Anyone? Yay, look at, whoa, turn around, let's give them applause. Thank you so much for coming. So tonight is a really special night for us in the program. One, we have a spectacular guest, which our Professor Georges will introduce in a moment. But there's another reason why tonight is very special, and that is because all of our third-year students who have returned to finish with the program are halfway through their final summer. All of our students who are here for the very first time are halfway through their first summer, but our students who are back for their second summer are exactly 1/2 of the way through the program from start to finish. This is the 1 year and 1 week anniversary of them being in the program. Now, why does that matter? That matters because immediately following this talk, we are going to encourage you. That means we're going to toss you over our shoulder and carry you if we have to join us around the corner at the Hubble Street Gallery for the opening of their Emanata Gallery show. Yeah! Now, can anybody tell me why we call our show at the halfway point in the program Emanata? Because of empanadas. Oh, I heard that there's going to be empanadas at Emanata. Oh, that's so exciting. But we had a hand raised. What is Emanata in comics?
It's like worried emotional lines radiating from you.
It's all those little, yeah. It's all those lines that sometimes cartoonists draw around someone when they're really stressed out and working really hard. That's Emanata. So this show represents the stress. No. It represents the hard work of our students, and so we hope you all come by for that. I think there was one or two other things I'm supposed to say before I get off the stage. Very special thanks to our program manager, Ben, and our work study, Myra, and my lovely wife, Anuja, for all helping get everything ready at the gallery. It's also San Diego Comic-Con weekend, which is a big weekend in comics. And if you haven't heard, 3 new publications were just announced from Lionforge that are created by 3 of our alumni, Sam Satin, Lauren Davis, and Maya Kobabe. It's amazing news. Next week, same time, same spot, Ashley A. Woods she's flown from Chicago, she's in San Diego, and she's gonna be up here next week. It's gonna be another amazing talk. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce one of our wonderful professors, professor of our first-year workshop, award-winning author, memoirist, amazingly cool person, it's not Justin. Let's give it up for Nicole Georges.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Let me just make sure we have enough water on stage for the next 4 hours. I'm Nicole Georges. I'm your professor, and I'm a cartoonist. Julia Wertz is also a cartoonist who I've had the pleasure of knowing, reading, and being in conversation with for quite a spell. She's the author of the autobiographical comics Fart Party, Drinking at the Movies, The Infinite Wait, and most recently, Tenement, Towers, and Trash, an unconventional illustrated history of New York City. I do want to say once I was volunteering with senior citizens, and my collaborator brought in a copy of Fart Party to show them. And I was like, Mark, don't show them Fart Party, it's inappropriate. And then one of the seniors started ripping on me and was like, it's only natural, speaking of farting. She's like, why is she so uptight? And I was like, I'm probably farting right now, you're correct. Anyway, please welcome Julia Wertz.
Yeah, so you guys, I heard you guys are halfway through your grad program. Is that right? Yeah. Cool. If I say anything that bums you out about comics, please talk to me afterwards, because I definitely don't mean to do that. But sometimes when you spend a lot of time by yourself all day, like, it just, shit gets weird. So I'm going to kind of show you guys a very brief overview of how I started in comics and what it looks like sort of the whole way through as told through comics, and hopefully you can kind of get an idea. But before I get into it, I'll say I didn't go to college for comics. It didn't exist 15 years ago when I was in college, but that's where I found comics, which I actually should have put in here, but I didn't. I was actually at SF State, and I found some comics at the Ingleside Library, and that's how I came to understand that they were more than like Sunday funny comics and stuff. And I started making them in the back of class, and then I stopped going to class, and then there's this whole thing where I'm not sure if I graduated, but like I did. But so going to college is how I found comics, and I'm really genuinely very jealous of you guys that you actually get to study comics as opposed to pretending to go to school and actually studying comics on the side. So I think it's really cool you guys have this opportunity, and I'm also really excited to talk to you guys afterwards about what you're working on, because I have no idea what that looks like anymore, and I want to see it. This is the first comic I made when I was working at the pool hall in San Francisco State. I'm not going to read you guys the whole comic because it's really stupid, but it was about a hobo spider, and he's on a search for his identity, and it was made for my friend Shannon Shaw. I don't know if any of you guys know the band Shannon and the Clams. They're kind of a local band. Some nodding, yeah. So we're high school buddies, and I made this comic for, and everyone was like, that was pretty funny. Like, you could maybe make some more. So I made this one. It was about birds that were like half man, half bird, and it's going to be a real rough start until I get to the actual comics, so just hang in there. Then I started making comics about me, and this is what they looked like. I colored them in with marker. My aesthetic was totally different. And then I graduated to some books called The Fart Party, and that's sort of how I found my own aesthetic and how to do comics. And these are my first two books with that one, and I'll read you guys some comics from there. My first period. I was 12 when I got my period, but I didn't know the blood could be brown rather than bright red. I hid my panties under a towel in the laundry and prayed my ma wouldn't find them. But of course she did. Sweetie, you got your period. You're a woman. Really? I just thought I shit myself. Oh. Shortly after my mom remarried, we met her husband's kids for the first time over Christmas dinner. So the other day I read about this device called a Diarrhea Mask. It's a plastic mask that fits over your face with an inch of space and nose holes, and then someone dumps out a tube at the top so it coats your face with diarrhea. You know, like a beauty mask, but poo. Well, that was a wildly inappropriate. These, oh, they're not over. So all I want is everything I can't have. To be good at karaoke. Her surprisingly lovely singing voice really reflects positively on her personality. What a relief, because if she had a bad voice, that would mean she was a bad person. A shapely, womanly body. Child, you do not have aesthetically pleasing birthing hips because you are not of the stock I wish to have procreate. In fact, I'm not really sure what you're for. Aw, you're so mean. An innate sense of fashion, so even the most casual outfits still look good on me. I don't know how or why, Tim, but it's totally working for her. I agree. It's all wrong, but it's fabulous. Very bourgeois chic. To be able to drink like a normal person. Another drink, madame? Oh, no thanks. I've had enough. Ice cream. Oh, so much ice cream without any of the consequences. How do you stay so slim? What's your secret? Ice cream. I eat all the ice cream. All that heavy cream and sugar makes your skin just glow. A good and purposeful existence. Really, Wirtz, this doesn't appear until the last panel. I maybe have my priorities a little mixed up. So this was what a lot of my early work was, and it was about a relationship I was in San Francisco, and not to make anybody uncomfortable, but we got back together a couple years ago, and this was like 13 years ago, and he's in the audience right now, probably hiding. But then you'll read this and be like, why did you get back together? I'm kidding. The Shitler. These are all true stories, by the way. I don't know if I needed to say that. This is when I lived in San Francisco. Can I draw on you? No. Last time you gave me a Shitler and it wouldn't wash off. I'll do something different, I promise. If you must, but use a washable pen because I have to take the bus later. Doobie-doobie-doo. Ta-da! What the? You gave me a Shitler and a unibrow? You jerk. Hey, is that a Sharpie? Surprise. I liked the genuine gasp that you guys like, it's a marker. Then I moved to New York, and I made these books, Drinking at the Movies. It's about my first year in New York, and The Infinite Way and Other Stories, which is 3 short stories. Yeah, that's it. This is, how long am I supposed to be up here? Does anyone know? I gotta kind of like gauge. Fuck. Maybe 15. Give me like a tap at 10, a signal. Just be like, too long. I'm just trying to show you guys the range of topics you can do in comics if you do autobiographical. It doesn't all have to be like shit jokes, basically. You can also do comics about when you're a child, like this one. When I was a kid, my favorite activity was gathering ordinary household items and constructing a small, simple fort in which I'd sequester myself, reading novels, comics, picture books, and magazines, and writing letters to my pen pal. If Ma allowed it, I'd spend all day in there. Julia, are you ever going to come out into the real world? There's nothing for me out there. The most exciting time of year wasn't Christmas, birthdays, or summer vacations. Ma, which day is it? It was the annual library book sale. Next Wednesday, same as when you asked this morning and yesterday. We would arrive at the library an hour before it opened and wait in line with the people who seemed impossibly old. Just 1 bag of books each, okay, kids? What? That's not enough. You guys haven't even finished the stack of books I got you last year. Yeah, but that's because they're boring. If you're not going to read those books, then I'm going to throw them away. No, Ma, you can't. You don't understand. We need them. When the doors finally opened, my brother and I raced inside. Good morning, everyone. The library is now open. No running, please. Even though the sale room looked the same every year, the endless expanse of books, magazines, videos, tapes, and records never failed to overwhelm us. If we arrived early enough, we had our pick of the best books. Wow, a whole roll of Stephen King. Ma says I can't read Stephen King until I'm 10. But if we arrived late or lingered too long in one section, all that was left were encyclopedias, romance novels, and often graphic medical dictionaries. This is also how I discovered Christian romance novels. They were so spicy. He would be like making out with her, and they'd be like, don't touch her boob, don't touch her. But it was like, don't, breasts. It was very clean, but I'd just be like, just touch it, just touch it. And then they never did, because it was Sweetbriar Christian novels. That was a weird tangent. My brother and I shared a playroom in a renovated attic that mostly served as a family library. On my side, there was a complete Nancy Drew series, and on Josh's side, the Hardy Boys. On both sides were mysteries, westerns, comics, picture books, sci-fi novels, Christian parenting guides, and an impressive number of self-help books from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Hey, do you have Mystery of the Clock Tower? No, Nancy Drew is for girls. I only read the Hardy Boys. Nah, you liar. I saw you reading The Haunted Bridge yesterday. Whatever. Did you know Carolyn Keene isn't a real person? Huh? No. What? All the Nancy Drew books were written by a bunch of different people, and in order to hide that, the publishers used a fake name. Same goes for Hardy Boys. Ah! Joshua, don't antagonize your sister. Although I read a lot of books, there were a select few that really stuck with me, whose pages I can still recall in vivid detail. Many of them involved food. What do you want for Christmas dinner? Anything special? Soda crackers and pieces of peppermint, which is what they ate in a little house on the prairie. What kind of kid gets to live in a house where there are cookies just laying around to give to mice? They must be rich. You give a mouse a cookie. That weird orange fish food looks so good. I wonder what fish food tastes like. And then I learned the hard way it tastes horrible. I also made a trail of cat food around my backyard and then backtracked and ate the whole trail. And then I threw up. So thank you. These raw beans and cold water are disgusting, but I must be grateful because I'm an orphan. It's the Boxcar Children. Ma, can we have Turkish Delight for dinner? Do you even know what Turkish Delight is? No, but I want it. From ages 12 to 6, I relied almost solely on books for information about growing up. I found out about pubic hair in a discarded issue of Playboy in the Backyard Creek. What's that? Public hair. You'll get it too someday. I stumbled across The Horror of Childbirth in an illustrated medical guide from my parents' library in the living room. Oh, is that baby coming out of her butt? Spoiler alert, it wasn't coming out of her butt. I learned about the aesthetics of the male anatomy in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Francie stared at the exposed part of his body in paralyzed horror. It was wormy white, contrasted with the ugly, dark sallowness of his face and hands. And then I just thought the phrase wormy white for always. I still think it every time I see a dick. I saw exactly what sex was in The Joy of Sex, which I found in the attic. Whoa, she has so much armpit hair. I was cautioned against drugs and Go Ask Alice, which was given to me, of course. I don't know, it sounds kind of fun. And my brother and I discovered rock and roll through the Christian parenting anti-rock book, The Devil's Disciples. Listen to this. The Sex Pistols were the epitome of amoral anarchists, headed by a foul-mouthed ghetto urchin with Vaseline in his hair. They were famous for 3 things: screams, curses, and vomit. We have to listen to that. If you guys ever have $5 to burn on Amazon, buy The Devil's Disciples by Jeff Godwin, and then just read it at parties. Like, if you just have excerpts and you're uncomfortable at a party, just read it and it fucking kills. I'm not sure when we stopped going to library book sales. Maybe it was after the fire or after Dad left. Or maybe we just grew out of it. But we still continued going to the library to borrow books. Books that served as pastimes, reading assignments, general information, specific information, and anything I could not get from my daily surroundings. All of these books, in almost all aspects of my life, help me understand the world around me, which to a child and an adult is a strange and curious place. So, after I put those books out, I took a little break and made some comics that weren't really about me. They're kind of more absurdist stuff because I was really sick of myself. So I wrote these ones with my brother, and they're like pseudo-advice comics. Why Can't I Sleep? Financial Woes, Bought a Couch. I knew I shouldn't have paid $5,000 for a fabric fart receptacle. So that fart joke was mine, and when I originally sent it to my brother, I had $500, and he was like, "You have no idea how much furniture costs." I was like, that's so expensive. Parasitic twin keeps biting your shoulder. Stop it, Frank. You know I can't feed you after midnight. Liza Minnelli in the walls. This is the only comic I've ever had printed in the New Yorker. I do stuff for their blog, but you'll see why they don't reprint my comics. What is Grandma knitting? A death shroud. A bowl of oatmeal. A voodoo doll of Gloria from Community Thrift, who is a real person that my mom loathes for no reason other than she's really nice. Indeterminate pile of yarn that is half cat hair. Drake. That is the appropriate response to this punchline, but when my parents saw it, my stepdad said, oh, imagine a person named Drake. And I was like, that's not, and I explained that it was a real person. He was like, I get it, it's absurdist humor. Yeah, and I was like, well, yeah, but, yeah. And then this is more what I do for The New Yorker. These are some just joke comics about my mom. Hey, Ma, look at this trinket that one of my comics fans sent me. It's so cute. It is. Do you know them? Not personally, but I've talked to them online. Well, I read about this girl who met a guy online, and on their second date, she brought 2 men with her, and they robbed the guy. They tricked him. And then they murdered him. What the fuck? Online is dangerous. So, Ma, last week, Jonathan, it's our little brother, told us that it took so long for the 5th Harry Potter book to come out that he read all the first 4 books multiple times. Like there were no other books in all of the world to read instead. Well, I heard about this guy who read all the Harry Potter books, and then he went out and murdered a bunch of people. What? Ma, I need like a lot more information. Yeah, that story's missing some pertinent facts. Well, I don't know anything else. Packing for backpacking. All I have for hiking snacks are nuts and crackers. I hope somebody brings Cheese Whiz. No, don't eat Cheese Whiz. It'll kill you. Some guy died from botulism he got eating gas station nacho cheese. Yeah, but that stuff is just baking in the open all day, exposed to all the filthy elements. Cheese Whiz is in a vacuum-sealed jar. It'll be safe to eat, well, pretty much forever, because it's not real food. Besides, everyone knows that eating gas station nachos is not a risk-free endeavor. Well, usually that risk is just diarrhea, but this time it was death. Then I made this book about New York City history, which I will have later. I think I might skip the comic in here because we're going a little bit over. I did a bunch of history comics, and that was cool. I guess it was like, I don't know. It is what it is. There's some photos in there. Whoa. Whoa, whoa. What are we going back to? That? What? Oh, that? You don't like that? You want this? But what about this? No? Okay. So I drew a series of then and now scenes in this book. So on the top is Broadway in 1915, and then below it is the same exact street in 2015. And someone recently pointed out to me that they're actually pretty much the same. Like they're advertising Broadway shows, and they're trying to sell you some stuff that's bad for you, like Coca-Cola, and then down there's Apple's watch stuff. So it's pretty much all the same stuff. This is a financial district in 1960s, and that's it today. On top is the East Village in the 1920s, and right below is what it looks like today. And I included this one because pretty much it's exactly the same except for the signage. And I didn't want to be like, it's all different, it's all terrible. I want to be like, look, a lot of the stuff is still the same too. Well, then there's this one. So this is Broadway in 1936 and today. Boo. So then I didn't do anything for like a year because working on that book almost killed me, and it was way too much work in way too short of a time, and I really hit a roadblock, and I couldn't do anything at all. So I was like, I read all these books about writer's block, and they were wildly unhelpful. I don't even know how to describe them. There's one called The Midnight Disease that's really good. I think I reference it in this comic. But what they did say repeatedly is like, write what you know. And I was like, well, I've been working on history stuff for so long, and what I know now is I'm back in California and just like I can't write, so I'll just do that. And so I started doing sketchbook diary comics, and I'll read a few of those. This one's about that, writer's block. I haven't written anything in over a year. As someone accustomed to being extremely prolific and who derives happiness from creativity, this poses a significant problem. I'm so blocked that I can't even adequately explain why it's so frustrating. I tried to write a comic about it, but I didn't get past the third panel, and this comic sucks. Then I read something in The Midnight Disease, The Drive to Write, Writer's Block, and the Creative Brain, that summed up my feelings in one perfect and devastating sentence. The inability to write reflects the sufferer's feeling that he or she cannot contribute to the world, cannot communicate in any meaningful way. So this is the fourth panel I couldn't write, or draw apparently, but at least I tried. And that did it. That like broke my writer's block, that stupid little comic. So now I make these comics every day, and these are just a few of the more recent ones. I mean, they're like I like go step by step through my day, so don't expect anything profound from these. Ordered some fancy herbs. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get fucked up. I'm gonna balance the shit out of my hormones and soothe my period cramps like a boss. Went jogging. Just like a bunch of 80s music. Made plans for the day. What are you doing? I'm looking online for stuff to do around town tonight, just so we know what kind of stupid shit is happening that we don't have to go to. Went to see Deadpool 2 in Santa Rosa, where there's a theater that costs only $3.50. Here's your ticket. Thanks. Now say it. No, I refuse to call you Daddy Warbucks when you pay for things. Hey Ma, will you do me a heckin' max favor and get me some Bork Thins? You know, the Bark Thins chocolate. Sure. You know what doggo memes are? No, I just think it sounded funny, like phonetically. Hang out in Sacramento. My brothers and I have a silly secret handshake huddle thing where we yell, "Siblings forever!" And then we do a little dance. It's pretty annoying, I'm sure. These days, I'm trying to be more present so I can remember and appreciate these moments. I want to remember this, a fun day hanging out while we're all still young and healthy, because someday soon we'll be old and then dead. It's working. And then my client told me, Josh, never shake hands with anybody because motherfuckers be touching their dicks all day. That's the end.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Hi, Julia.
Hi.
What time do we need to wrap this up, Matt? 8? Great. So much time. Don't worry. There will be time for a Q&A. Both.
Hey, yeah, I would just like to out you.
Do you want to know my first question? Go ahead and tell them first.
So Nicole and I talked about questions briefly beforehand over email, and then I was looking over her shoulder while she was writing it down, and it just says, "Who are you?"
Julia, who are you?
Like in a professional sense or an existential sense?
Here's what I want to know. I mean, I know that you just showed us the evolution of your work, but I want to know, like, self-publishing wise versus getting published by other people wise. You know, you went from self-publishing to being in the New Yorker. So, like, what's the arc of your comics? Like, how did they get from your house to more people?
Yeah, so I guess that time period covers about 13 years. Like you guys saw, this just started. I was like living in a closet in San Francisco by choice. It was, you know, fit a mattress in the closet. And I didn't go to school for it, and I started making comics just on my own in my notebook. And on the back of receipts, I used to work at Cafe Beer, which isn't here anymore, and Valencia Pizza and Pasta. I don't know if you guys know a place downtown. It's delicious. But and then people were starting to put comics online. Like web comics was sort of a thing. No one was really making any money from it, but you could get a lot of people looking at your work. Then like Patreon wasn't around, that kind of stuff didn't exist. So my boyfriend at the time made me a website, and he was like, "What do you want to call it?" And I was like, "Well, I made a funny joke that the punchline was fart party, and we'll just call it that because no one's gonna see it." And then that became my career, and I'm stuck with that name forever. But it was really like a couple weeks ago, I was on stage at the Museum of the City of New York, and I was just thinking, like, this is so fancy. And then they had to introduce me, and the person was reading the titles of my book, and they were, you know, like The Infinite Weight, Drinking the Infinite Fart Party. And then it was just dead silence, just like this room full of historians. I didn't like it. But so those went online, and I kind of had a webcomic presence back when counts were very different back then. And I put it in a zine, and I went to APE, and that was my first convention, and I met a lot of people we're still friends with today.
The Alternative Press Expo. She met people including Alec Longstreth, who has been the teacher of some of you, or some of you have heard lore.
Yeah.
So you went to APE, and then people were like,
to
what's
APE?
this fart party?
And then I was famous, the end.
This looks pretty good.
No.
Well, how did you go from that to being published by people other than yourself?
So a small press from Baltimore, Atomic Books, reached out to me and said they wanted to put out a collection, and I had a couple of zines, so I sent them over. We put out a little collection, and then it kind of just grew from there. I don't really, I don't know. And then just little by little, kind of inched up, and I moved to New York, and I was, for no reason, I wasn't like, I'm gonna be famous. I just went there, and then ended up making a book about moving to New York that came out with Random House, and since then, just kind of keeps going. I guess I don't know if that.
Well, you
means
keep
anything.
making comics no matter what.
Yeah, even if no one wants to read them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have that feeling too. I feel very fortunate to have readers, but if I went out of favor one day, then people are like, we hate Chihuahuas. Ooh, lesbians, yuck.
That'll never.
I
No,
would-
but those are like fail-proof topics. What people do get tired of is like the heteronormative comics about like, this is my boyfriend and this is my day. So I
Well,
feel like
don't worry, there'll always be straight people in the world.
this is true.
I think. Okay.
You gonna ask me who I am now?
Julia, who are you? Who is Julia Wertz? Is this a Charlie Rose moment? Would you describe yourself as when you meet somebody like in an elevator and you want to impress them and they're like, what do you do?
No, I go, who are you?
And I would be like,
Just let it
I'm a cartoonist and a professor and a podcaster.
Is that the voice you use?
Yeah.
That's
I
horrifying.
use like a Maria Bamford voice. But would you describe yourself as a cartoonist, a graphic
I do. I
memoirist?
say cartoonist. I don't like graphic novelists just because I feel like most people know what comics are. Most people know what cartoons are. However, I do think the general public often assumes that that when you say cartoonist, they immediately think of like Calvin and Hobbes or Garfield. So that's kind of still a weird thing to navigate. Once I was on an airplane and somebody asked me if I was drawing comics, and he was like, oh, do you do Kathy? And I was like, Kathy Wise is like 60 years old.
Did you say yes?
No, but even weirder was the guy behind us who leaned forward and went, do you do Doonesbury?
Also, yes. I was on a plane when I was like 23, and I was coming back from Invincible Summer Tour, and I told a guy I did graphic memoir, and he was like, how graphic? I was like, that's not what it means, so I stopped saying that.
Yeah, there's more things kind of involved, and then you have to explain the difference between comics and graphic novels, and that's like another step. You have to figure out if they even want to hear about what you do. I also just like cartoonists. I like how it sounds. It sounds cool.
It does
Graphic
sound cool.
novelist kind of sounds pretentious and boring, even though I make graphic novels, but
It's great for if you're writing a grant. You say,
Yeah,
I work in graphic literature, sequential narrative is my craft.
yeah, and they're like, I don't know what that means, but it sounds fancy.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I want to get in this emerging field that encourages
I'll tell you
literacy.
what, no one's gonna give you money if you're like, I'm make a comic called Fart Party. Just doesn't
My
work.
oeuvre is fart party. All right, we're gonna tag team. You tell me one, I'll tell you one. Tell me what you wish you had done differently. You've had 13 years right now that we're covering.
Okay, the biggest one is I scanned my first 2 books in at 200 DPI.
Ooh.
Because I only asked one person, and he only gave me I think he meant like online it can be 200 DPI. And then I never asked anyone again. So retroactively, I would have asked so many people, which is why it's great that you guys can go to school and actually ask people and have people teach you this instead of just asking one chucklehead, like, what do you do? And then you have an entire book in an unprintable DPI.
One thing I would have done differently is, I'm going to go in the same vein, make sure that my publisher that offered to publish Calling Dr. Laura knew that it was 14 by 17 I was working at. So then at the end of 2.5 years of inking, they wouldn't go, ooh, this is way too big. Can you print this at a different size? So I wish I would have been more clear up front.
Yeah, just like pay attention to those really boring statistical, technical things. Because also if you do illustration and then they come back later and just be like, oh, we said horizontal, but can it be vertical? And you're like, the fuck, that's a whole different drawing. So,
All right, next
you gotta
thing.
know those things, yeah.
Next thing you would have done differently.
Oh, not called my comic Fire Party.
What would you have called it?
I don't know, I have a dumb joke where Johnny Ryan asked me that, and I was like, something like more sophisticated, like flatulent soiree. But I don't know. I do think it's funny. I enjoy watching a person in like a tuxedo stumble over the Wirtz fart party on stage. Like that fills me with joy. That fills my cup. But at the same time, it does get a little bit like over and over having to explain. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
I would have used rulers and pencils a lot sooner because I just told my students this today. But when I started making comics, when I would hear guys like Scott McCloud or like just like dude men be like, "Here's the way to do comics. Here's the right way to do comics," I'd be like, "Well, forget you, man. I don't need a pencil or a eraser or a ruler. I'm punk." And I would just do it in ink first time, whatever I felt like. And if it was out of order, I just add arrows. And if I wrote the word misspelled, cross it out. Leave the crossed out part on there. Rewrite it somewhere else.
I like that, though. That was like kind of the whole like zine punk comics thing where we were like, we don't have to read understanding comics. We can do whatever we want.
I just understand them, sort of. But I guess like at a certain point I was like, oh, I want to make money from this and have more readers besides like the punk people that are used to stuff looking like trash. No offense, punks. That's like part of the appeal. And so then it took me a long time to be like, I guess I'll use an eraser.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to read all the rules and then just decide which ones you're going to not abide by. Because you don't have to abide by all of them. But it's just good to know them.
Yeah. What is something you wish someone would have told you when you were an up-and-coming cartoonist?
Skin stuff in at 600 DPI.
600 DPI.
What do you teach?
What do I
scan in?
teach?
What do you tell them to scan in?
Like 600. They never
Yeah.
ask me, though.
Oh, okay. Well, because everybody knows. Apparently, it's a...
I think they
thing.
Google it or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, 600 DPI. Some people for black and white artwork do 1,200 DPI, which I can't handle.
No, that's madness. Something I wish someone had told me. Maybe... I know this was my question that I sent you, but then I didn't think about it at all. What about you?
I wish that someone would have told me a lot earlier to be friendly to everyone, even if I thought they were annoying, because that can help your career. Like if you're at a comics convention and someone's bugging, instead of being like, you have to be like, and then just turn away.
You never know when assholes become famous.
Exactly.
That's terrible.
But the other thing I wish someone would have told me is if a place owes you money, find the accounts payable person and harass them, not the art director.
Oh, yeah, because that's how you never get a job from the
You
art
never get a
director
job again if you harass the people that hire you for the job.
Yeah,
But the accounts payable people are used to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
The being nice to people thing is actually good, not just because in case they become somebody, but comics. It's a much bigger world than when I was getting my start, but it's still very small in comparison to fine arts or to literature. And if you burn a bridge with one person, you could burn a lot other ones because it's a small community, and also it's a very nice community. It's a lot nicer than a lot. It's like not as competitive, I think, as other ones. Also, we're all just like a bunch of sweaty nerds who sit at home all day long, and we're all very socially awkward. So it just helps to remember when you're like, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable." It's like we're all uncomfortable. This is a nightmare for everybody. Like, it's fine. So just be nice to each other. It's a hard world out there.
What's your least favorite thing to draw?
People. I hate drawing people, which is funny because that's all I draw.
What's your favorite thing to draw?
Buildings, which I never ever want to do again because it was a nightmare.
When you say that was a nightmare, how long did each page take you? Like when you're saying that you were driven to the edge with this book, what does that mean?
That means more that I tried to do the bulk of that book in less than a year, which meant I went to Colorado and just put myself in seclusion, and I worked 16 hours a day for more than months at a time. But everything in real life just got shoved to the side, and I had also just moved back to California. It was a time I should have been very present in my life, but instead I was just drawing all day and just watching like Shark Tank. That's not a good thing.
Oh, I love Shark Tank.
It's so good, but when you're pummeling
It's stressful.
that into your psyche, like 16 hours a day of Shark Tank, and then you just...
Capitalism,
Yeah.
big box,
Yeah.
valuations.
It just puts out a weird message in your brain, but it's thoroughly entertaining to draw to. But looking back, I just wish that I had asked for more time. I mean, I did, but I wish I had been like, hey, real life should take precedence over sitting at the drawing desk 16 hours a day. So maybe I should have asked for more time. However, sometimes that's just how you have to get it done.
How do you measure? I'm getting a little deeper in the weeds. This wasn't even on the piece of paper. Something I'm concerned with in my podcast is the idea of success versus accomplishment. So what are things like, to me, that book from afar is a huge accomplishment. What are things that you feel proud of for accomplishing in your career?
That's a good question, because to me, I consider that book a success.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't consider it, assuming that accomplishment means you have more like personal gratification.
I think it's more like internal, external. So success is like external measures of success, meaning like, accolades.
Yeah, okay, so on paper, like that one looks important. Like it got a great review in the New York Times that like I could show my mom, and she was really excited. And so all of that kind of stuff on paper I consider a success. It looks great. I'm glad I did the book. I'm glad it's out. I never want to do one like that again. But I get more personal gratification from like putting a diary comic up on Patreon, and it gets like 10 likes, and I'm like, fuck yes. And that's probably, it's a huge chasm between the two success-wise, because one is just Patreon. Like everyone can be, it's great. Nothing, it's direct to audience. But I like that more. I get more satisfaction out of that than I do like being able to like put a byline like the New Yorker or something. Like that isn't really, that's a success thing, but it doesn't bring me joy.
Joy. I think about you in the same league as people like Ariel Schrag or John Porcellino, in that you have a really simplified main character, but you have incredible drawing chops for photorealistic things as well. I know that we've talked before about you wanting to like change your character, but it seems like that's the character that kind of lives in your doodle hand, like in you somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to sort of change it in diary comics. I was drawing it different and just looked really serious. And I came back around to being like, oh, I'll just leave it how it is, because that's a facet of my personality in which I put like all of my stupidest jokes and all of my worst character qualities. And maybe it's better that it doesn't look exactly like me, that it can be like a cartoony kind of thing. And there's also this quote, I say this quote almost every time I talk, and I might be quoting, I think it's a Charles Schulz quote that's like, the more simple an image is, the more people can project themselves into it.
I just told my students that this week.
Yeah? We're all just repeating each other. We have
it's
5
wonderful.
things
You're reinforcing
that we know.
it. Yeah.
The other thing is write for yourself and edit for an audience. That's the other one everyone says, right?
Oh, I say write with the door closed, edit with the door open, which is a Stephen King joint.
From On Writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite writing book, On Writing, by Stephen King.
I was just reading something today where he quotes one of his students' essays or something, and then he's like, oh, who farted, right? Like, that's what he said about his students' work in his book. Anyways, that's all it takes. It's just like one fart joke, and I'm like, I'm there. What was I even saying? Oh, yeah, so if you have a simple character and people can project themselves into it much easier than a complex character that sort of puts distance between you and the reader. And all I want is for people to read my stuff and identify with it, so we can all just, connect to each other and feel less alone, and that's it. So I realized I had a simple character, and I'll just leave it simple.
How is your character on the page different than you as a human being?
My character has much better comedic timing. I think I put more negativity and cynicism into my character than I hope I would have in real life. Also, a lot of people think I'm going to be really mean when I meet them, and I have a resting bitch face in real life, which doesn't help. So they're like, I saw her and she looked really cranky.
Can we see it?
Like, it's right in front of you. That was a forced one.
Well, now it's moving.
Well, when it's not moving, now everyone's going to say that. Anyways. But I'm not as mean in person, I think. Like, my character is much more judgmental, and I can be judgmental, but that's me, like, taking one bad character quality that's not constant and then blowing it up out of proportion because it's funny.
Are there things, as an autobiographer and a memoirist, that you will never draw about, or that you really try to keep out of your comics?
Anything that would hurt somebody. Like, sometimes there are things like, my brother has a very complicated story, and I had started to make a few comics about that, and after a while he was like, can you just not? Like, that's my story to tell. And I was like, of course. Like, it played a huge part of my life, but it's not my story, so I won't do it. So if I've been asked not to, if I think it'll hurt somebody, and I try not to make people look like an asshole. Like I make my boyfriend look like a dick all the time because it's funny to me, but like he's not, and hopefully readers know that he's not. And I don't put a lot of sex stuff in it just because, like my character's really cute and it looks weird when it's naked. It's just weird. Like it kind of looks like a child, so it looks a little weird when it's naked. I don't know. And my mom reads it.
She does?
She does. She loves it. She's like, oh, I like the ones I'm in. I'm so funny.
Do you ask people before you put them in your comic?
No, it's more, I do like that sort of do it and then ask for forgiveness versus asking permission.
I agree with that.
Yeah. But again, I try not to make people look too bad.
You know what? Even the lawyers at my publisher told me not to ask people before we put it out, because if we were just going to put it out anyway, then they would have some kind of legal foot to stand on. Isn't that sinister?
Like they knew it was kind of like you asked, so you knew.
Yeah, I was like, well, maybe I should ask this person if I should show her kicking my dog. And they were like, no, let's just like see what happens after it comes out. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Well, also if you change their name, it doesn't matter, right?
Well, I mean, they like my publisher has a legal read. I don't know if this happened for you with your book or if it applied, but they have like a lawyer read through my book and be like, is your mom particularly litigious? And I'm like,
no.
yeah. They have somebody go through and say, you can't say this, you can say this. This part is what you're allowed to say about your story, and the people around you, this part you're not.
Oh, no, I've never had that kind of editing. Yikes.
How do you feel about being edited?
It really depends. I've definitely had editors where they've suggested things that I've been like, that's a terrible suggestion. Like one of them had, like some of my comics will end like, I'll use a funny word that's very topical or like of the zeitgeist or something, and they're like, you should change this to like the real word. And I'm like, then it's not funny at all. And so when they mess with the punchlines, then I'm like, well, that's not really a good editor. So because of that, for the most part, editors I've worked with just step back, which can also be a problem. Sometimes they should be like, maybe don't use this word because it's on the way out, or it might be offensive. I mean, you can't be like, it's going to be offensive in 5 years. My first book has the worst words possible. It would have been nice if an editor had been like, don't say this laundry list of words.
I agree. Invincible Summer collections were put out by a small punk press who gave me 0 editing, and in fact, there was like a handwritten typo on the first page. And it would have been nice to have somebody be like, you want to use this word to describe this feeling? Are you sure?
Yeah, the whole DIY thing too, like my first book, the person who went through and edited it intentionally left in all the spelling errors, which I didn't know.
Thanks.
And then after it came out, I was like, this book has so many spelling errors. And they were like, oh yeah, that's part of like the DIY. And I was like, oh my God, no. Also, you have to have an editor that's good at communicating with you, like, hey, we're gonna do this. So I could have been like, don't do that. That's terrible.
Yeah. What professional practice tips do you have for us? Or what has served you well?
How about you go first on that one?
The be nice to people thing, the harass the payment person thing. Make sure I'm clear on all the specs thing. Make sure you have all the information at the head before you start doing anything. Every piece of information you could possibly ever want. About payment, about contracts. Always get a contract, even if it's your friends, especially if it's your friends. Especially if it's like a small punk press that's like, we don't even do contracts. Be like, well, then we need a contract.
Yeah. What about day to day? 'Cause I asked a question recently, like how do I can't get anything done in my studio, and I end up drawing out back a lot. And then you had a good response to what you do to get work done.
Oh, okay. I drink a lot of coffee. I have a routine to get me in the mood. It's essentially like when people in an 80s romance thing light candles and draw a bath and count the rose petals, which for
And
me,
then make comic, yeah.
the sexy thing for me is I put on my Smok. That's how I know I've clocked in for the day. I have the same incense I burn every day when it's work time.
What smell?
I have one that's like what is the stick of wood?
Palo Santo.
Thank you, everyone. We're in California. The stick of wood, the Palo Santo, or some like Nippon Kodo green tea incense, or like those ones that you put in the teeny tiny teepee, different ones. So I'll light some of that.
Did you just say you put it in a teeny tiny teepee?
Yeah, there's like a kind of incense you get, and it comes with like a ceramic teepee, and then you put it inside, so it's like the fire's going out. It's a real thing. It's not. We used to sell it at the feminist bookstore. I don't know. And then I play the same playlist on my ancient iPod, the same playlist. So it's like the same 12 songs, and that gets my brain in the mood. Like, it's time to work. Smok is on, water's here, incense is here, playlist is on, and now this is what my brain is doing. And my phone is like, chuck your phone as far away as you can.
Yeah. So it's like the ritual of getting to work. All right.
Yeah. What do you do?
Well, I've been having a lot of trouble with it because the news takes up a lot of time. And then looking at celebrity gossip takes up a lot of time. I know they have apps where you can cancel the internet for a while. I assume that would work really. But then I would just be like, can you uncancel it? I don't see how that works.
Yeah.
Like, that's too much self-control.
Well, like when you lived in that basement apartment in New York and you were making a lot of comics about it, would you just have drawing hours every day? Like, how often do you usually draw?
I would just do it every day. I would wake up, drink coffee, eat breakfast, and then work, and then work and work and work, and then it would be time for bed. And I did that for a long. I don't recommend living that way, but sometimes that's how you get shit done.
What do you like to listen to while you draw?
Shark Tank, I told you.
Anything else besides Shark Tank?
Yeah, I watch those really bad Netflix documentaries. The ones where they're like alien secrets of the pyramids, and I watch all of those, and then I don't remember any of them.
But when do you have, like, when I have to write, like, not inking, not filling in stuff, but when I have to sit down and write, I have to really be precious about it and, like, get amped on coffee and be alone, away from everyone, and wearing the smock, and a little bit caveman, like, no bathing, no toothbrushing, don't care about that.
That's for writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, writing's very different from drawing, and I can only write for about 2 hours max a day. I remember reading this interview with David Sedaris where he's like, I write for 2 hours and then I go to the movies, and I was like, why wasn't I a writer? Because I write for 2 hours and then I draw for 14.
Oh my God. This is the new way I've chosen to martyr myself, is to think about how much harder comics is than writing. I was on a panel with a woman that had written a comic and had someone else draw it for her. And I said that writers had an easier job than cartoonists. And she was like, oh, nuh-uh. And like,
Oh, they 100% do.
because we write a whole book. And
And
then
then we draw it. And that's insane. Just draw someone else's book or just write a book.
Yeah.
But of course, you do what you love, and it is a labor of love. But yeah, it is. If anyone's like wavering between which one to do, be a writer.
Be a writer. Let's open it up for questions. Do you have any last minute things that you want to tell me before we open it up for everyone else?
No, I think we can go to. I mean, we never solved the
Who are
eternal riddle of who I am, but that's fine.
Well, maybe that's what all the questions are going to be.